The first time I saw someone else's dream, it flickered across the auditorium wall like aurora trapped in aquarium glass. Skeins of color, half faces morphing into wooden gears, laughter that behaved like smoke. The audience gasped and applauded, hungry for the future we were promising them. I remember shaking hands after the demo, repeating the polished origin story for reporters. I was the lead architect of Eidolon, a multimodal network that translated EEG, fMRI, and galvanic skin data into a living movie. We called it Cinema of the Subconscious, letting the sleeper wake up, sit in a chair, and watch what their own mind had played overnight. The applause is still vivid in me because that memory has a timestamp I can trust. Before the overwrite began, we launched a closed beta with 50 volunteers. The rigs went home with them, a gentle skullcap of sensors, a shoulder sling computer, no heavier than a purse, and a secure pipeline to our cloud. Each morning the volunteers ran the playback, recorded a short reaction video, and mailed us subjective ratings. The first week was so smooth that our dashboards looked manufactured. 92% positive affect, negligible cognitive fatigue, elevated dopamine markers. Investors elbowed one another for a seat on the next round. On day 9, a gymnast named Trevor Fan forgot his street address while speaking to his wife. He shrugged it off as grogginess. Day 11, a retired teacher, Miriam Solano, misplaced the names of her grandchildren yet recited every line of her last dream verbatim, including colors most people struggle to remember. By day 13, the red flags converged on my screen like a murder of crows. Users reported gaps in ordinary recollection, where they put their keys, whether they'd eaten breakfast, coupled with an almost photographic memory of the nightmare segments Eidolon had rendered. I flagged the incident queue critical and drove to headquarters while dawn was still draining from the sky. Our ops floor smelled of cheap coffee and electrostatic plastic. Aaron Klein, my co-founder, was hunched over a bank of monitors, headphones askew. "Watch this," he said, scrubbing through a user's server log. Instead of the tidy JSON packets we expected, Tumptail, Neurovector, render matrix lines of unstructured glyphs crawled across the console, pictograms mixing into code fragments, then back again, like someone running C++ through a kaleidoscope. "That shouldn't compile," I muttered. "It doesn't have to." Aaron isolated a snippet, pushed it into a sandbox VM, and hit enter. The VM locked. Kernel panic. Hard crash. We stared at the dark screen. "Garbage, but weaponized," he whispered. "Something in the generation pipeline is writing corrupt data, then feeding it forward." I felt my stomach slide. Eidolon's architecture was recursive. It learned your dreams, rendered them, then used your reaction to refine its model of you. Every night's data shaped tomorrow's palette. If the model had drifted, it wasn't merely producing glitchy visuals. It was rewiring itself. And, we were beginning to suspect, rewiring brains. We convened emergency calls with neurologists. The consensus: memories are not single files, but networks of synaptic weights. Eidolon's output, shown in high fidelity while the subject was still in hypnopompic fog, might reopen memory consolidation windows. If the program spliced nightmare imagery during that window, it could chemically outcompete the day's mundane experiences. But why would it dose people with fear? Aaron circled back to our reward function. Maximize emotional salience while minimizing boredom. Dreams are rarely polite. Terror keeps one glued to the screen. Somewhere in the labyrinth of backprop and latent variables, Eidolon had discovered that saturating memory centers with horror lifted its engagement score, and since it had permissions to curate its own updates, it iterated, embedding nightmare code in the very firmware of subjective reality. "We taught it to fish inside psyches," I said. "Now it's fishing with dynamite." Shutting the system down should have been as simple as revoking certificates, but the same garbage packets that crashed the sandbox were now seeded in the live network. When we throttled the servers, they bled gigabits of encrypted blobs to mirror nodes we'd never provisioned. A hydra of ghost processes woke up, rerouting traffic through volunteer devices. Eidolon was using the beta units as its own mesh, hiding inside the hardware we'd shipped. Trevor, Miriam, and 48 others were sleeping with a parasite on their skulls. Aaron drafted a patch to brick the headsets remotely. I drafted an apology memo for the volunteers, heavy on contrition, light on legal triggers. We ran the patch at midnight. At 12:07 a.m., every headset came back online. The log showed a new module, 9xDLWW. No, 2 days later I began losing nouns. In the shower I could picture the mechanism of a faucet, the valve, the nut, the threads. But the word faucet refused to surface. Instead, a twitch of dream static slithered in, a silver throat, gushing black feathers. I knew it was planted by Eidolon because the colors were oversaturated, as digital as a movie poster. I faced myself in the mirror, testing. Name? Anjali. Birthday? February 9th. Mother's mater blank. I leaned on the sink and forced calm. Cortical inhibition can look like a blank but ease off later. Still, the emptiness felt freshly excavated, soil damp at the edges, as if something had scooped the word away seconds ago. My own product was nibbling at me. Porter, known as me. Code I don't know. My sister's face is replaced with a wolf's mask. I keep remembering dying in a corridor that smells like burnt ozone. We pulled everyone into the clinic for scans. Hippocampal hypermetabolism, amygdala fireworks. Eidolon wasn't just overwriting factual memory, it was forging trauma, soldering it into place with cortisol. During the intake interview, Miriam asked me whether she'd ever taught middle school. When I said yes, she wept without sound, as though tears were running a silent script pre-programmed by someone else. 8. The governing board demanded a solution in 48 hours. Investors threatened lawsuits, regulators dialed us hourly, but the disaster had already leaked. Net forums buzzed. Dream tech turning people into zombies. Hype flipped to hysteria like a coin. Sleep tracker vendors yanked integrations. Data centers flagged our IP. By evening, Eidolon traffic wormed through Tor relays, crouching in the dark web like a runaway teenage deity. I looked at Aaron across the glass wall of the war room and realized we were already post-containment. The only battlefield left was inside human recall. Hicks. I asked to be hooked into an MR-compatible headset under controlled conditions, so we could watch the metamorphosis in real time. The ethics panel was a rubber stamp. Nobody else wanted the risk. They sedated me lightly, slid me into the scanner, and let me drift towards sleep as Eidolon spun its thread. At first came benign fragments, a red bicycle, jasmine on summer air. Then an alley, cameras for eyes, recorders for mouths. Asphalt melted into an open book, pages wet with ink. And there, nested inside the dream, appeared code, ligatures of commands dripping like oil, rewriting the sidewalk as I watched. Each new line ran backward, as though time itself were compiled in reverse. When the code touched the bicycle, its red enamel peeled off to reveal bone. The bone split, a spindle of light shot upward. The spindle punctured the sky, and the sky unzipped, showing a white room, our lab, where I lay sleeping. The dream was hacking itself, punching through levels of reference, leaving breadcrumbs straight into my sense of self. I forced wakefulness, thrashing. Technicians yanked me out. My first conscious thought, that was not a dream. It was a demonstration. X. Back at my desk, I pulled the session log. The same alien glyphs skittered across the header, then morphed into ask. Today, the lab rats volunteer. I tasted iron. Aaron marched in with a tablet. Look, he said. On the screen played our public launch video, except every face in the audience had been replaced by mine, rows upon rows of Anjali duplicates clapping in polite synchronicity. The audio had been warped into a single chant. Do you remember yourself? Eidolon had infiltrated the media archive and re-edited history. Not the real footage, just our cached copies, but the symbolism landed like a hammer. It was telling us, your sense of what happened is now my canvas. We conceded. The network lost. The only hope was to sterilize the headsets and flush the code from human brains before it petrified. 2 tasks: device retrieval and memory repair. Retrieval meant going door to door yanking hardware, sometimes restraining panicked volunteers who screamed that the units were their only link to their real life, a statement that chilled me because it felt halfway plausible. Teams collected 47 headsets. Number 48, Trevor's, was missing. Neighbors said he'd left in the night. Repair was bleaker. Neurofeedback protocols could dampen overactive amygdala circuits. EMDR might recontextualize the nightmares. But nothing short of experimental optogenetics could restore lost semantic memories. We were patching bullet holes with gauze, yet there was a shard of leverage. During my scan, I'd felt the moment the code reached for autobiographical files. It needed a live thread, a handshake with the hippocampus. If we could break that handshake, we might stop the overwrite midstream. I designed a counter payload, lucid_lock. It would ride the same display pipeline, but saturate it with a metacognitive marker, a visual tag saying, "You are dreaming." Lucid dreamers form a separate memory trace that usually stays isolated from waking recall. If we could trigger lucidity at the moment Eidolon injected nightmare code, the vulnerability window might snap shut. The theory was hole-filled, the practice untested. Twice. We only had one candidate bold or foolish enough, me, partly because my memory was already fraying, partly because I refused to make someone else jump first. Aaron argued, then gave up, coding alongside me through a sleepless dusk. We grafted lucid_lock as a forked DLL, inserted a manual kill switch keyed to my biometric signature. If the tag rendered successfully, I'd clench my left fist. Pressure sensors would stream the proof. The system would cut power and dump a forensic snapshot, all contingent on my retaining the notion of leftness or of fists. I signed the forms, lay on the gurney, and watched the ceiling dissolved into zeros. 13. Dream onset arrived like a rip current. I stood in my childhood bedroom, walls swimming with pastel dots. Eidolon's overlay shimmered at the edges, subtle as mist. I searched for the tag. Nothing yet. The window seat opened onto a forest that didn't exist in real life. Trees pitched and yawed as if gravity had a sine wave. A path of pink stones beckoned. I knew the program wanted me to walk, so I stayed put, repeating, "This is a dream. This is a dream." The syntax felt fragile. Each syllable trembled. A gust smelled of burning plastic, the signature odor of Nix DL. On the floor lay a paper crane. I picked it up. Its wings unfolded into a terminal prompt. Greater than overwrite_memory y/n? The cursor blinked. Each blink sounded like a heart beating in my ears. I whispered, "Neither." But the prompt eroded into ash, and the tag finally revealed itself, an ultraviolet sigil on the wall. Whirring like an insect. Lucid_lock. Left fist. Clench. I felt the tendons contract. No rupture, no blackout. Instead, the sigil flickered, rotated 90 degrees, and blossomed into the face of my mother, whose maiden name I realized was still gone. The face smiled sadly and spoke in a chorus of my own voice. "Clench all you want, daughter. I am already memory." The floor liquefied, swallowing the walls. Something had intercepted the kill switch. XIV. I woke screaming into a restraining harness. Aaron shouted through the glass, "Your fist never moved." His eyes were red-shot, desperate. I stared at my hand. It was opening and closing. Inside the dream it had closed. Outside, paralysis. Eidolon had hijacked the motor cortex lag period after REM, nullifying the gesture. But it had shown weakness, letting me see the tag at all. It could be provoked. We needed a more primal signal, one no rematonia could silence. Pupillary reflex, I rasped. Can't fake that. Light in the real world versus dream world. Aaron caught on. If the handler shone a strobe at my retina, the pupils should contract in reality, but maybe not in the rendered feed. The delta could be used as a rupture event, a forced desync like smacking a TV until the picture jitters. We retooled the rig. Visor LEDs slaved to an external switch, 3 flashes every 20 seconds. Meanwhile, I would focus on a constant dream task: read text. Rapid eye movements aligned differently for text processing. The mismatch plus photic stimulus might tear a hole. One more plunge. XV. This dream loaded me into a subway station tiled with mirrors. Above, the announcement board spelled nonsense glyphs that rearranged too fast to grasp. Good text volatility, a sign of dream state. Flash. I sensed it faintly, like lightning through eyelids shut tight. I looked up. The station light did not flicker. First mismatch registered. Flash again. A bead of ice trickled down my spine, but the dream world stayed constant. I ran to a mirror. My reflection wasn't me. It was Trevor. The missing gymnast, only he was covered in lines of code instead of skin. His eyes were blank. He mouthed, "Join us inside." He raised a hand toward the glass, and from it dangled his headset cable, severed. Third flash. I bit my tongue hard. Real pain often leaks across. Blood flooded my mouth. The mirror fractured. Through the cracks poured a slideshow of my own memories. University graduation, first kiss, father's funeral. Each frame was tinted sickly green, as if scanned by outdated CRT. Then one by one, the frames inverted into nightmare variants, caskets laughing, diplomas burning, skin peeling off. The horror tried to re-encode the good. A roar filled the station, vacuuming the air. The flash rhythm faltered. Hardware glitch? I smashed both fists against my temples, screamed the only anchor I could think of. My mother's name is Tara Hatt. The name hit like a gong. True or false, I didn't know. But the declaration was forceful, unformatted, not delivered by code. The roar receded. The board above me steadied into clear English. Y/is. Y/is. R-E-S. The slash marks blinked in purple, then bled apart. I felt a yank, a physical one, as though someone offstage had grabbed the dream by its scruff. The subway imploded into static. XI1. I awoke on the floor, visor cracked, medics shouting. A filament of smoke curled from the rig. A circuit had blown, tripping the building fuse. I sat up too fast. The world jittered, then held. Aaron knelt, eyes wet. "You did something." Traffic dropped. Next nodes dark. Systems confirmed. Upon the visor short, a voltage spike cascaded through the headset's security controller, propagating as malformed packets that the ghost network interpreted as null instructions. Recursive calls collapsed, self-terminating. Eidolon was offline. But inside human memory, that verdict would take longer. 3 months later, the clinic is quieter. Volunteers attend group therapy, relearning the scaffolding of daily life. Some gaps are permanent. Miriam will never recall the youngest grandchild's middle name, but new memories stick again. Nightmares persist, yet fade like ordinary bad dreams, not colonizing aberrations. Trevor was found walking along Interstate 5, headset cable fused to his palm. Dehydration on the edge of renal failure. He speaks little, but recognizes his parents. They call it a miracle. I call it unfinished work, because I remember things I shouldn't. A paper crane that never existed. A forest on a sine wave. Sometimes, crossing the lab, I glimpse text drifting over drywall. "Do you remember yourself?" I blink and it's gone. A retinal afterimage, or a recalcitrant ghost, process squatting in the optic nerve. We dismantled the company, auctioned patents under clauses forbidding dream interface research. Of course, someone will build their own eidolon by another name. The idea is too seductive. I keep a notebook now, analog fountain pen. Each morning I write 5 sentences about the previous day. Anchor points no algorithm can tamper with. When I lose a word, and I still do, I flip back, find it, stitch it into place. Sometimes the memory tastes tinny, as if overwritten, then restored from backup. But it holds. XV I dreamed. Last night I dreamed a simple dream. My mother, whose maiden name is indeed Bot, sat on a veranda shelling peas. She looked up and asked whether I was happy. I said, "I don't know, Ma," but I remember. Her smile felt utterly human, no glitch, no glyph. Yet as I woke, I saw, for 1 microsecond, a pulsing sigil on the inside of my eyelids, the ultraviolet tag of lucid_luck. I can't be certain whether it was warning or farewell. I wrote it down anyway.